Hello, everyone. See a lot of new faces out there. Pretty much. Is this pretty much everybody's first time at a PDX-iOS?
This is my first time.
I think so. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm Ryan, and welcome to PDX-iOS. Without further ado, I'll give you Mark on home automation, how to have your house not kill you.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So thanks for coming, guys. My name is Mark. I have been doing Objective-C for about 12 years-ish. I started back on Mac OS 10.2. So a long time. These days I've been working on iOS app development here at Esri, and I also have my own apps, my own software, and a lot of weird side projects that I work on from time to time. So that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I'm going to be talking about some home automation stuff that I've been up to. And I started kind of getting into that as an experiment about 2 or so months ago, and somehow ended up building a home automation iOS app for my apartment. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about. And the whole thing was super fun, and I'm excited to share it with you guys. So this is it. This is the app I built. It's named the Monster Pit, which probably requires some explanation. At my house, I have a lot of like weird artifacty things, like antiques, animal bones, or like my friends say, a lot of creepy shit. So my friends donned the name Monster Pit for my apartment, and it stuck around, and so that's what the app is called. Yeah, it's the Monster Pit app. And I should also mention, well, yeah, the way this whole thing started. Like I said, I started doing a little bit of experimenting with some of the like consumer hardware that's out there, and of course, they had their own apps. And the thing that I found. I tried those. I tried some of the other services like If This Then That, and Launch Center Pro actually has some pretty cool integration, but all these things only let me do like 90% of what I really wanted. So in order to get that extra 10%, I had to start writing code. So these are the pieces that I'm going to be talking about. These are kind of what makes up my app. Belkin Wemo switches are what I started with. Belkin has a whole range of products that they put under the Wemo name for home automation. Core location geofencing, I use that for location awareness in my app. For indoor positioning, I use iBeacons. iBeacons from a company called Red Bear. And my app communicates with my Arduino for sensors and kind of information about the real environment. And yeah, last I use Parse to handle the communication between the Arduino and the iOS app. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So what I'm not going to be talking about is there's a whole range of really cool products out there, and some of you guys might have used some of them, and maybe you even have like way cooler home automation setups than I do. I'm just going to be speaking about the work that I've done with my own apartment, which is changing all the time. I'm also not going to be talking about HomeKit, which I apologize if anyone was interested in that topic, since it is like one of the kind of cool things that was announced with iOS 8. But even though you can write a HomeKit app and you can simulate all this stuff on your computer, there's really no HomeKit hardware out yet, so timing is not quite right. This is the Belkin Wemo Insight switch, and yeah, like I said, this is what I started with. And tried the Belkin app, didn't do what I wanted, but thankfully they have an SDK. So I started playing with that and started integrating that into my own app. The SDK works pretty well. There are a few well, actually it's kind of horrible, but it works, which is what's important. There are a few kind of gotchas to consider if you're going to use the Belkin SDK. So it took me at least maybe a couple hours to actually get this working in my project. My advice to anyone is take a really close look at the example project that Belkin gives you, and take a look at the build settings and the libraries that are required, because until you get that exactly right, it's hard to get going and start using the SDK. It's a minor note, but I did have some problems with the SDK blocking the main thread at times, so it's something that, not for too long, but for like 10 or 20 milliseconds here and there, so not ideal. It does seem to work if you just put those methods on a background thread. I did file a bug report, and if anyone wants to work with Belkin, I encourage you to email their developer support and ask for the full source. So yeah, one of the things that I found really useful for working with this stuff was just to build my own wrapper around the Belkin library, and that kind of, well, one, it hides some of the ugliness, and so you don't have to deal with that everywhere. But also, I hope to eventually buy some other devices and switches and products from different companies, and this will let me just add those into my project without having to change code everywhere. So. My goal with this app is I want to have a few different inputs that I combine together in kind of like a rules engine, a real simple rules engine, and use that to make a decision on whether the lights should be on or if they should be turned off, and have that all happen automatically without any user input or having to push buttons or anything. So that's kind of the way I designed this app, was to have 3 different classes for each of the rules, and run those and process those, and then perform an action if necessary. One thing to remember if you're doing something similar to that is it's really good to have an indeterminate state instead of just on and off, because each everything that I'm doing in this is like the location stuff, the iBeacons, it's all done asynchronously, and some of that stuff can take several seconds if you're lucky. So if you default to either on or off, as I found, you get really weird results. First up, geofencing. I want to have the app turn the lights on when I get home and turn the lights off when I leave. Pretty simple. It's the ideal use case for geofencing, kind of. Geofencing is easy to work with in iOS. You just use core location, and it's low battery, easy on the device. So yeah, if you've never used core location and geofencing, it's pretty simple to set up. You create an instance of a CL location manager, and you create an instance of a CL circular region, which you pass in a coordinate and a radius, and that defines the area of your geofence. You take that, you pass it to your location manager. Let's see, you call start monitoring for region and request state for region. Those are the 2 methods that kind of kick that off. And from there, you get delegate callbacks on enter and exit. So pretty simple. Yeah, there are some gotchas to geofencing. One of them is that there is actually a minimum distance. You can't just define arbitrarily small geofences. I think it's something like 50 meters or so. So that's that helps, because it knows pretty well if you're inside or outside the geofence. Of course, it does work better if you're in an area where there's a lot of Wi-Fi access points. So like in Southeast Portland, where I live, or downtown, works great. It may not work so well if you're developing an app for like out in the countryside. And in fact, one of the things that I did notice is that geofencing is pretty reliable, but it's not 100% reliable. So you may, depending on what accuracy you want, you may want to use some of the other core location stuff to occasionally check the location using some of the other methods that they give you, and then determine for yourself if you're inside this geofence area or not. And it's one of the things that I have to do. Another kind of gotcha if you've worked with core location in the past, but not for iOS 8. There are some new methods in iOS 8 you call request always authentic authorization and put a special key in your info.plist file. And when you do that, when your app first runs, it will then prompt the user to allow location services for your app. But you will have trouble if you don't implement that method. Oh, and then that gives you a second delegate callback, where from within that you actually start monitoring the geofence region. Yeah, so I think that covers positioning outside. And then for inside, there's iBeacons. And iBeacons are a Bluetooth LE device. That's the iBeacon right in the center there. Basically what it does is it broadcasts a low energy Bluetooth LE signal with its ID number, and the phone listens for that and then tells you when it's within range of the beacon. Pretty simple, pretty easy to work with. This beacon is from a company called Red Bear in Hong Kong, and it cost about $35 to get shipped here, so not too expensive. And there's like at least 3 or 4 companies that are all making iBeacons now, and they all have different features and different capabilities. The thing that I like about this one in particular, I did look at the Estimote ones and was comparing the two, but this one has AAA batteries instead of coin cell batteries, so you can use rechargeables and they last a little bit longer, which is nice. This one also has, you can turn the transmit power up and down, which is especially useful for my use case. The way that I'm using this, I put this iBeacon in my nightstand drawer, and then when I take my phone and plug it in and put it on top of a nightstand to charge overnight, it sees the beacon and knows that it's time to turn off the lights, it's time to go to bed. So being able to turn down the power is useful because then I can make sure that the phone only sees it when it's actually on top of the nightstand and not when I walk in the bedroom, for example.
These things last for months, right? You have to change the batteries every year.
They say that this one lasts for about a year, and I've had mine going for 3 or 4 months now, so still testing it, but we'll find out. Yeah, so it's actually really similar to geofencing, the way that works. It doesn't have to make any network calls or anything. Again, you create a CO location manager, and instead of doing a circular region, you do a CL beacon region, I believe. Yeah, CL beacon region. And you pass in the beacon's UUID. And again, just pass that to your location manager. And yeah, start monitoring for region. And then you get delegate callbacks when it sees the beacon. So there's also something called beacon ranging, where you can ask your phone to tell you what distance the beacon is, and that makes it a little bit more accurate. Uses a little bit more battery, I think, but it's something that I didn't really need, at least for this app. Beacons are pretty reliable in my testing, but there are, again, some gotchas. If you restart your phone or turn it off and turn it back on, it could take a couple of minutes for it to start detecting beacons. Normally, it detects it pretty fast. It can be slow also if the app is not open and your phone is locked. It can take maybe 5 or 10 seconds or so. So yeah, there's a little bit of a wait there. And there's a really good article that someone published. You can search for it, but they did all kinds of investigating into different ways of using the location manager and using ranging, for example, to try to make it pick up the beacon faster. All right, so that's indoor positioning and outdoor positioning, but the problem I was facing now is that the lights are turning on and off, but I don't always want them to turn on if there's a lot of sunlight in the room. So I thought of a couple ways to solve this problem. One of the first things I thought of was I could use a weather API and get the time of sunrise and sunset, maybe if it's cloudy out. What I decided to do instead, though, was to use my Arduino and hook up some physical sensors to it for detecting the actual amount of light in the room and using that to determine if it's dark enough to turn the lights. And so this is my Arduino. I have sensors for temperature, humidity, light, and motion. The Arduino is pretty easy to use. You write what's called the Arduino sketch in C, and there's all sorts of open source libraries, so you don't have to deal with hardware directly. You just communicate with the libraries, and it's pretty easy. There are a lot of tutorials and guides out there, so something like this can pretty much be done in an evening or so. It's not too hard. And a lot of people have heard of Arduinos, but maybe not the Arduino Yun. And the Yun is essentially a standard Arduino that has Wi-Fi Linux networking built in. So it's pretty cool and makes it super easy to communicate your sensor data to an iOS app or any other online service without having to do your own Wi-Fi networking or anything like that. I'm doing this in a couple of different ways. The easiest way to do it is there's a library that lets you just create your own API for the Arduino Yun that runs right on the device. And then from your iOS app or just a web browser at home, you can just make any regular network call. And you can return data in whatever format you want. It doesn't really matter. You can do plain text or JSON or HTML, whatever makes the most sense for your application. And that works pretty well. I didn't really have any problems with that. But of course, that's limited to your home network. Arduino is on your local Wi-Fi, and your phone is on your local Wi-Fi, but if your phone is out on the internet somewhere, it can't communicate with that. So what I decided to do, I decided to use Parse. And Parse, if you're not familiar, it's a cloud platform. Has a lot of different features for data syncing and user accounts and all of that. But what I was really interested in was push notifications. And I set this up on a timer so that the Arduino will collect the sensor data, put that into a little piece of JSON, and use curl on the Linux portion of this chip to send the JSON up to Parse's servers. And Parse takes that, turns into a silent push notification that's sent to my phone, and then my phone has the data. So it works pretty well. One of the cool things about Parse is that it's free for under 10,000 or 100,000 users. In this case, there's one user, it's me, so it's nice not to have to pay for that. You could use CloudKit as well. CloudKit does many of the same things as Parse. It wasn't available when I first started this project, but it should be a good alternative as well. I did have a couple problems with this setup at first. I was getting all sorts of errors from curl. And the Arduino is, it's still pretty low powered. It has not much processor and not much memory. So I really had to kind of take the JSON and really shrink it. Take out all the white space and turn the keys into single characters. But once I did that, I was able to get this working pretty well. Yeah, so an alternative, if you do want to do a lot of data processing, might be a Raspberry Pi or a more powerful microcontroller. Haven't started playing with any of those yet, but it seems like they might be a little bit more suitable for handling some of the networking that's going on here. All right, so that's pretty much the 3 rules that went into making this app. And you would think that those 3 things would be pretty simple, but it's actually not. And there's a lot that can go wrong with failed networking calls and things being disconnected when they're supposedly connected. Yeah, and so I learned a couple things when working with this app that I wasn't really thinking about right at first. First is you want to really consider working in the background for a home automation app like this. And you could make something that just works when the user has it opened and is playing with it, but that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to have to take my phone out of my pocket when I'm coming home in the dark or anything like that. So iOS can do all of this. It's fine to work in the background. You just have to remember that there are some restrictions. You can't use some things like timers or the run loop that you would normally maybe rely on for doing periodic checks. There are certain entry points that you have to kind of focus on in your app where you get called even when you're in the background. Core location delegate methods are probably the most important one. Push notification delegate methods are another one. And then any long-running thing that you want to do, or even like something that goes for more than a few milliseconds, you want to make sure to put that into a background task, or else you risk your app being suspended and not receiving the response of a network call or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Second point, you definitely want to have good logging and good status indicators in your app. And that's something that I learned pretty quick when lights started going on and off at 3 a.m. when I wasn't expecting it. What I ended up building was just a simple, table view, base view that showed the log messages. And yeah, you could just use nslog, but you're probably going to want to start, do some debugging while you're actually using this app and not while it's plugged into your computer. So it's good to have something you can open up right in the app and see exactly what's happening when the phone is doing something. The biggest problem that I've had working with this app is what happens when my phone is out on the internet away from my local network. And, like you were saying, you want to check something after you perform that action. And yeah, Belkin's SDK kind of relies on having a local connection to your device, which isn't ideal because oftentimes you'll leave the local geofence, but you've already lost your network connection. Or you'll come home and enter your geofence, but your phone hasn't connected to your network yet. So there are a couple different strategies for this, and I'm still figuring this out myself, so I'm not sure if any of them are particularly right or not. There are some services, I mentioned If This and That, does work with all Belkin stuff and a lot of other home automation devices. So for a while I was trying to use that in conjunction with Dropbox and a bunch of just various email and Dropbox rules on If This and That to send commands to the Belkin devices and get status from them even when I'm out away on the internet. And I found that didn't really work too well for me. It was pretty flaky. There were some times when things would not respond at all, or there would be such a delay in response that I was already then on my home network and sending different commands. So didn't really work out for me too well. You could also use iBeacons more than I have, and maybe try to do more local proximity detection to detect, all right, I'm actually walking out the door and I'm still in the range of my Wi-Fi network, but now I know when I've left the house in a more kind of localized way. And the third thing, which is what I'm working on right now, is maybe turning this into a client-server app, which is totally way more work than I would have thought of when I first started getting into this. And yeah, but it kind of makes sense to have an iPhone or some device on your local network controlling the Belkin switches, and then communicate with that with the phone in your pocket using Parse or CloudKit or something else. And I do have an iPhone 4 that's kind of just sitting around acting as a security camera right now, but I could develop an app for that, and that would, I think, solve these problems and also let me do some kind of neat stuff with maybe making a guest app for my friends if they come over. Could turn the lights on or do something silly like play a song when they walk in the front door or something. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm going to be taking this in the future, and I post a lot about it on Twitter when I'm working on these things, so you can follow me there if you want to hear more about it. It's kind of cool, just how much stuff is out there. I'm actually really excited about seeing the future of home automation because I have worked in the past. This was like many years ago, but I've worked with some X10 devices and other things like that, and they were pretty flaky. Didn't exactly work right and were way too much effort to get set up the way to do anything useful. At least for me. Maybe some of you guys have tried that and like them, but I didn't. But But I'm really feeling confident about what is out there right now. There's been all sorts of products on Kickstarter, and now those products are available in the store for consumers to buy, and there's new products on Kickstarter. Phones are getting way smarter about recognizing the environments that they're in and being able to position themselves indoors. There's iBeacons. There's stuff that Google is working on for sensor data, and yeah, they're really improving all the time. And I'm pretty confident about where these things are going. It feels like it's kind of year zero for getting into this kind of stuff in a lot of ways. And if you're excited about it, then this is a great time to start going and experimenting and building some stuff. All right, well, thanks, guys.